talking about what is pollination. Before we go into the main details, let's first ask a question. What is pollination? So pollination is a bug or an insect or bird or an animal which carries pollen from one flower to another. And during this process, the fertilization happens in the flower, and then that flower gives birth to a seed or a fruit or vegetable. Before we look in the process, let's first go to the parts of the flower. So example, this is how pollination happens. It's where the bee lands on the flower. It lands on the anther and some parts on the stigma. So it collects nectar. But the anther makes pollen, right? So some of the pollen gets trapped on its legs, and then when it leaves from this flower and it goes to the next flower, it takes that pollen, and then pollen is on the bee's legs. It sticks to the stigma sticky glue, and the stigma sends it to the pollen tube, and then the pollen tube sends it to the ovaries, and the ovaries sends it to the ovals, and then the ovals use that pollen to make fertilization. Fertilization happens, and then a seed is formed. Then ovary becomes into a fruit or vegetable, but the ovals become into a seed. This is one way of pollination, helped by insects, birds, and many more. There's also another way of pollination, and that is the wind. So the wind carries the pollen from the anther, and then when the wind blows, it collects that pollen and then goes to another flower and sticks on the stigma, and then the stigma sends it to the pollen tube. The pollen tube sends it to the ovaries, and the ovaries send it to the oval. So that's another way how pollen is sent. If a pollination is sent from one flower to another, then it's called cross-pollination. Self-pollination is that the flower is pollinating itself. It's where the wind blows and the pollen is sent from here to its own stigma. And this is called self-pollinating. How pollination and fertilization happens, and this is how the flowers are able to make their own seeds, fruits, and vegetables.